two speakers today from the Get PR Done campaign. I'd like to welcome James Doran and William Relton, and I better look at my agenda. If you could say about your campaign and where you, and also some of the points that we raised earlier in the blurb that I said. So, who wants to go first? William.
Well, James and I had a very brief meeting yesterday. I was going to start off by telling everybody what Get PR is and does. I wasn't aware that Alan was going to be at this meeting, and he is the founder of Get PR Done. So I'm sure when I make mistakes, which I will do, that Alan will dive in and correct me, which is fine. So anyway, Get PR Done, I think, has been going for about 3 years now. 2 years, Alan? Yeah, yes or no? 3.5. I joined about 1.5 years ago. The simplest way of describing us is that we're an organization that punches way above its weight. We don't have many active members. We probably have about 30 people who actually do stuff, but we have a massive following on social media. I think we have 20,000 Twitter followers and 15,000 Facebook followers. And there are 3 main strands to our work. The first is social media. We have a very strong presence on social media. We make films, we write blogs, we tweet endlessly, a very dedicated team that do all that work. Another very important part of our work is campaigning. We should have been at Toll Puddle last weekend, which unfortunately was called off for health and safety reasons. Alan and some other people went up to Durham, to the Durham Miners Gala a couple of weeks ago. I and at least 3 other volunteers regularly turn up in Parliament Square on Wednesdays during PMQ. We hand out leaflets, we talk to people, we campaign, we've got stickers, we're going to get T-shirts, all that kind of stuff done. And then there's 3 strands to the campaign. What's the third one, James? Campaigning, social media. Alan, I can't hear you.
You're on mute, Alan, at the moment.
Councils for PR.
Oh, bloody hell. Sorry, everybody. Councils for PR. Councils for PR is a joint venture set up about 18 months, 2 years ago between Get PR Done and Make Votes Matter. And again, a small group of volunteers. There's about half a dozen of us. We've written to 7,000 councillors around the country, trying to persuade them to pass our motion in support of PR, and then write a letter to Westminster saying that they've passed this motion. We've had 25 councils so far pass our motion or something very similar. There's plenty more in the pipeline. We're starting off a new program of writing with MVM sometime in the autumn, and that's what Get PR Done does. We have no direct funding from any of the larger organizations that give out the money. Alan does a sterling job in fundraising. We've just recently raised over £1,600 for our current batch of summer campaigning, paying for our leaflets, and we need more help, which would be great. So if somebody wants to join us out of this meeting, you'll be very welcome. But that's who we are. I wasn't proposing to talk much at this stage about why. That's the what. James, do you want to say something, or does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if I can come in quickly. Yeah, I forgot to say, if you want to speak, if you could press the reaction button, which I think you can raise your hand or submit, or if you need to just wave at the camera, then I'll bring you in, okay? But please try to use the reaction button. Yeah, James, sorry.
My name is James, and I've been involved with Get PR Done for the last couple of years. I was invited to write an article on why socialists and the Labour Party should support proportional representation by Alan in 2021, and that article was included in a tabloid paper that we handed out at Labour's 2021 conference in Brighton when the issue of proportional representation went before the conference. for the first time. Of course, it's only been in 2022 that the Labour Party conference backed PR, so that's a policy which is overwhelmingly backed now by Labour Party's membership from the majority of the local constituency parties through to majority of the affiliated trade unions. I've been a member of the Labour Party since 2009, so I can remember when they were last in government with a commitment to introduce electoral reform. The last time that Labour went from opposition to government in 1997, it was with a manifesto commitment to introduce electoral reform, and the party did set up a commission with the support of the Liberal Democrats to look into what alternate voting system there might be for the UK Parliament. But that proposal was kind of kicked into the long grass by virtue of the fact that the means of introducing the new voting system was via a referendum. Of course, the Labour Party at the time didn't really fancy creating an opportunity for to be beaten in a referendum, potentially, and also was doing quite well under first past the post at that particular point. But that obviously hasn't always been the case for the Labour Party. Its forerunner was the Independent Labour Party, which was the adoption of a strategy by trade unionists to try and stand candidates outside of the Liberal Party, which is where initially Labour stood candidates as part of the Liberals, and so the initial Labour Party MPs, before there was a Labour Party, were caucusing with the Liberals in Parliament, and often were elected as part of either running within the Liberal Party or electoral pacts. And all the time I've been a member of the Labour Party, I've been a member of another political party, and that's the Cooperative Party, which was set up after the First World War to represent the interests of cooperatives, you know, the movement of democratic member-owned businesses. And they didn't have a voice in Parliament, and so they took to forming a political party and standing candidates. But of course, the nature of the electoral system is winner takes all, and so you are forced to cooperate to try and gain representation. So for 100 years, Labour has actually had a pact in place with another political party to help it win elections. So that's interesting to think about in terms of any kind of principled opposition that Labour might have to doing deals to get elected. I think one of the issues I've found with proportional representation is that you can spend a lot of time discussing the technicalities of the voting system with people that you're trying to win over. But that's kind of a distraction from the political issue, which changes people's minds on why it's a priority. And that's around things like the climate emergency and the fact that for there to be a period of time in which we address this, it's going to be the case that there would have to be like a strong majority in Parliament to take measures to address climate change. And the other perhaps more immediate and pressing concern that has led the trade unions to come around to the idea of supporting proportional representation in recent years is that there's a realization that the first past the post system is one which disadvantages organised labour and has an inherent bias to conservative parties because of the Labour movement's strength in urban centres and the way that you need to have a concentration of votes for a party means that other potential allies of the Labour movement in a national parliament, they are disadvantaged by a first past the post system. So we have, as getprdone, we have produced leaflets on the importance of PR to address climate change on the Extinction Rebellion demonstration. And we also produced a leaflet to take to picket lines during strikes, making the case for fair pay and fair voting, obviously making the argument about why it is to the advantage of the workers' movement to have a fairer voting system. But one of the barriers we do sometimes face in making the case is that, well, there's already been a referendum on PR, and that, of course, is a reference to the AV referendum of 2011, which was a referendum on electoral reform, but it wasn't on changing the voting system to a proportional voting system. And there isn't, of course, a requirement to hold a referendum. This often gets thrown up like, you know, wouldn't this require a referendum? Do we want another referendum, given how difficult it can be to get people to focus on the issues of a referendum, rather than it being just a protest vote against the government of the day? And of course, there's no constitutional requirements to hold a referendum on electoral reform. There just needs to be a majority in Parliament to bring it in and to get it done. One of the issues within the Labour Party that I've encountered all the time that I've been a member is a kind of philosophical tradition which is known as Labourism, which is the idea that what the Labour Party does alone is enough or will be enough to implement enduring radical change. And obviously the rational basis for this position has been that the Labour Party has at periods been able to form majority governments and implement significant reforms. It's worth pointing out, though, however, that you know, perhaps the most radical Labour government, the one after the Second World War, took office not from opposition, but from having been in a wartime coalition. And it lost the election that took place after its term of office, despite getting more votes than the Conservatives. So it suffered at its most radical and perhaps at its most popular in terms of the level of support for it, just because of the voting system. So I think people are coming around to the idea that there's a lot more competition for the Labour Party. They now have to contend with the fact that voters can see there is a Green MP in Parliament, there are SNP MPs in Parliament, and the competition there then is much greater. And part of, in the past, I think, what has perhaps led people to vote tactically for Labour, where they might not have agreed with everything the party was standing for, was the commitment in 1997, when it went into government, to electoral reform. And so it's really in the Labour Party's interest to have this policy in its manifesto, because that does kind of seal the deal with people who might in future want to give a first preference to the Greens or to other political parties. And obviously it's something which is just broadly beneficial that you have a national government which actually has majority support, which is not the case today. I mean, it's really quite amazing that we got such a landslide result 4 years ago, where most people did not vote for the governing party. And so for people looking my age and younger, they have experienced like a majority of us not voting Conservative, and yet finding that we are continually governed by the Conservatives. And obviously this is not a new experience, but I do think there's a greater awareness now of the issues around the electoral system. People have access to more information, and people can also find out more easily about what the local political situation is in terms of whether they want to vote tactically. So yeah, I think I've spoken for long enough. I don't know if any of you are still here, and you can ask me questions if you want.
Thank you, James, and sorry. Yeah, thank you, James and William. I'm really pleased that we got people from different traditions in this meeting today. Green National was always promoted as an eco-socialist group in the Green Party, engagement with the left, and we see that that's what we do. Okay, I'll go for the first speaker, and that will be Anne Gray.
Thank you. You just said that it required a majority of MPs in Parliament to vote that PR should happen. And isn't that a complete vicious circle? Because as long as they have been elected by the first past the post system, and the majority obviously have, the vast majority obviously have, why on earth would they want PR? You also haven't mentioned the Lib Dems, and I wonder why, because they are a much larger force than the Greens, unfortunately. And I think also a larger number of MPs than the SNP at the moment in the London Parliament. So I wonder what you think is the role of the Liberal Democrats, who generally speaking have been in favour of PR. So 2 questions there, please. Thank you.
I'll bring you back, both of you, if you'd like to answer that question.
Well, I would just like to say that, you know, at getprdone, we do actually work with members of the Liberal Democrats. So we have a kind of quite a broad range of views in terms of which political parties we support. And I do think that's an important question about what the Liberal Democrats might do in future, because in 2010, when there was a home parliament, they did not hold the line for the proportional representation that they supported. They didn't say that we should have a referendum on single transferable vote, which is the system that they have always supported. And I guess it's an unfortunate part of politics, is that that the politicians do have a strong interest in things remaining the same and not becoming more competitive. But of course, if it's the case that voters are making the case to politicians that they want more competition and that they will vote accordingly, then that does put a bit of a pressure on politicians to actually to implement this, because they'll be looking to win those voters over. And so it could potentially be a source of competition, the question of fair votes between different political parties. And that might mean that we get a situation in the next parliament where there is a majority of MPs who will be willing to change the voting system and bring in fair votes.
Yes, that's certainly what we're hoping for. I mean, it is a double bind, because yes, all MPs are voted on the first past the post system. That's what our system is. Alan and I have had many conversations about how to deal with this. What we would love to see would be the idea of people's parliaments, that it goes to a people's parliament to actually make the decisions.
Want to go out? Want to go out?
I'm sorry, I'm hearing somebody else's voice.
Yes, hang on a second. It's a new person to the room. Welcome. She's person that's now. You can speak now. It's okay. It's
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't trying to shut anybody up, but I just wondered what was going on. Yes, if there was a ruling party enlightened enough to allow people's parliaments, that would be an excellent way of bringing it in. As James said very eloquently, the idea of referendum is not a good one because it's so often it's used to bash the government rather than to seriously be a question about what we should change and what we should not change. Although I think it was, and Alan will correct me if I'm wrong, I think in New Zealand, which recently voted in PR, they actually had two referendums. The first one was, do we want to have a referendum? Do we want to look at this? And then that passed. And then they spent a long time discussing and debating which form of PR they should actually opt for. And that also went back to the country and they did it. I think the only way that we're going to get it in this country to start off with is by putting pressure endlessly on the elected representatives in Westminster to debate it properly. It was a terrible mess what the Lib Dems agreed to when in the coalition. I would add, though, because the Lib Dems were mentioned, two things to say about that. First is Get PR Done is absolutely not party aligned. We're cross-party, no party. We will talk to anybody who supports PR, and we will also attack anybody who does not support PR. We're very, very clear about that. That makes us slightly unpopular with some of the other groups, but that's just tough. That's what we feel, and we feel that very strongly. We want to bring to the public's attention who is supporting PR and who isn't, and let them make their minds up. The other thing I wanted to say, though, in addition to the Lib Dems have a much, much better track record of fighting and making big public statements about PR. A disappointment for me in the Green Party is that we don't put PR high enough up on the agenda. As far as I'm concerned, it should be second after climate change. We should be on about PR all the time in the Green Party. What's his name? I'm sorry, names have gone for me this evening. The deputy, Zach Polanski, who is now the deputy leader, spoke very, very, very strongly in terms of supporting PR. And that all seems to have gone quiet. And I think the Green Party, we have to make the case constantly for PR.
Thank you for that. I'll bring in Martin Francis.
Hi, one of the arguments that I often hear on the left, from the left, about PR, and it kind of reflects on some of the things that have been happening in Europe with right-wingers getting into government, is the danger of extreme right candidates succeeding and being a strong force in Parliament, and what that could lead to. And thinking, for example, about the Conservative Party and Suella Braverman and her National Conservative movement, a danger that the Conservatives will split with an extreme right version of them. So how do you answer those criticisms when they come to you?
It's a criticism that's continually raised. There's lots of different ways of looking at it. I mean, my first answer is if we stay with what we've got, we have two right-wing parliaments for every left-wing parliament. That's what it's been over the last 100 years. So we actually end up with more right-wing governments than we do left-wing governments with the first past the post system. Yes, the right internationally is unfortunately on the rise at the moment. It's a terrible situation. PR is not a silver bullet. It can't solve all the problems, and by giving the far right the oxygen of publicity, my belief is ultimately they will burn themselves out. There will always be a support for the extreme right, always, in the same way there will always be a support for the extreme left. There is no easy answer. My fundamental reason for supporting PR and doing as much work as I do for PR is that it is the fairer system. nobody at this meeting is entitled to say to Katie Hopkins or whoever that they are not allowed to make their voice heard. We're not allowed to, we can't do that if we live in a democracy. In a democracy, all voices need to be heard. I do believe fundamentally, particularly in this country, we are still, despite the efforts of the last 13 years, we're still a country of compassion. You'll all remember the wonderful moment on Question Time a couple of weeks ago when the audience was asked who supported the Rwanda idea. Not one hand went up. I mean, this may be naive of me, but this is who I am. I'm always an optimist, and I believe in the fundamental goodness of human beings. And yes, the far right is strong at the moment. And ultimately, I think that will burn itself out. And the alternative, as I've already said, is we have 2 right-wing conservative parliaments for 1 Labour left-wing government. That's what it's been for the last 100 years, and I'm not prepared to accept that anymore. That's my answer. James, do you want to say something?
Yeah, it is something that does come up in terms of objections and concerns about the sort of nationalist, populist parties that have been able to grow across Europe under PR systems. But I guess it's a question, as William says, you know, do we believe in democracy or not? And is it better that these people are standing for election and putting their views to the public in a peaceful way, or whether they're resorting to kind of violent activities? And so you do face that problem that the people with some really unsavoury views could get into Parliament, and those views will be getting a greater prominence. But ultimately, you do have to engage. You do have to engage with the racist and xenophobic arguments anyway. So
could I add something to that, James? You see, I also believe that if you don't give these people some form of platform, it just festers and it gets nastier. And when the extreme groups do have the oxygen, I mean, look at how the British National Party, for example, just disappeared because they were useless. It didn't last, and I think I have enough faith in the population of this country that there will be people who support it, but the vast majority of people I don't think will. And by giving them the oxygen of publicity, they will burn themselves out. I fundamentally believe that.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to bring in Alan Todd.
Right. Obviously, this is not a place to discuss how we oppose the far right, the hard right, fascists, etc. But in terms of working with any group that's in favour of PR, does that include Farage and his latest hard right political business that he's set up? And the other thing that I'd like to say, and that several people have spoken about PR quite rightly in terms of greater democracy, helping democracy. Why is the campaign, from what I've seen, for PR, instead of talking in terms of a democratic alliance, using a rather wishy-washy term, which is progressive alliance? PR is about democracy, you know, and it's under that umbrella you can have the major political parties, which, given the fact that most of them are to a greater or lesser extent in favour of neoliberalism, would be a peculiar way of applying the word progressive to parties that have done what's been going on in the past 13 years, not just the Tories, I hasten to add. So those are my 2 questions.
yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, progressive and progressing. Well, what are we progressing towards? You know, extinction, quite possibly. So yeah, democracy, I think, is a good way of framing the issue. As regards to Farage's sort of reformed Brexit Party reform, I don't think that those people are actually interested in PR, because if you think about it, they kind of, I mean, what are they gaining from such a system? They're probably losing something, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine that Farage would have been able to get Brexit done if we had PR. You know, you wouldn't have had the necessity of the Conservative Party to try and hold on to votes in 2015 in certain seats, promising a referendum on EU membership. You know, I just don't think that they view PR as really something which is going to advance their politics. So I don't really encounter any people who support those kinds of parties that want to get involved in campaigning for PR. I mean, some of the leading people will make noises about PR occasionally, but I don't think it's going to be at the centre of their ask, really, of the government. They'll be wanting things like a referendum on whether we should focus on net zero. I mean, that'll be the kind of asks that they will have from, say, the Conservative Party in the coming year.
I don't think James and I entirely agree on this. A few months ago, Alan posted a video of Katie Hopkins, and there was a bit of fuss about it. From a pure PR point of view, there was nothing in what she said that we could have criticised. The rally, the MVM rally that I went to in Parliament Square in February of last year, which is actually how I first made contact with Alan, Richard Tice from the Reform Party spoke. And most of the speakers, of course, were left-wing or progressive and progressive. Richard Tice stood up, and I was one of the crowd. I was one of the members of the crowd who sort of did a lot of, I'm not quite sure, but actually he spoke very well. I don't know how we, and this is something that Alan and I have discussed quite a lot in the past, at some point, we have to join with the right-wing parties who want PR. It would be undemocratic of us not to do so. We have not yet found the mechanism to do that, because I think the majority, I mean, certainly the Conservative Party, the vast majority of the Conservative Party is very against the idea of PR. They know how very damaging it would be to their chances of working majorities anymore. But there are people on the right who want PR, obviously because it gives them, if we have PR and there are enough people that vote for, say, the Reform Party, it will guarantee them MPs. Which is not far off the Green Party or the Lib Dem view. You know, as I'm sure many of you are aware, if we'd had PR in the last election, we would have 20, 21 Green MPs at the moment, probably far more, because many more people would have voted Green in the last election, I think. But of course, so many Green Party votes are regarded as a wasted vote. So I don't know what the answer is. I would love to find a way of joining the parties together without losing the left-wing parties. I think the left-wing parties will always give more support to PR than the right-wing parties, but I think we need to find a way of getting the right-wing parties as part of the conversation, because that's the only democratic thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say though that the Reform Party isn't really a political party. UKIP had branches and members across the country, and you would meet them and you could talk to them. But that isn't something which really exists for the Reform Party. It's kind of like a ginger group for the Conservatives. And that's kind of how it functioned in 2019, right? Because they popped up, they hadn't previously existed. They were going to stand in lots of places. They said that they would stand in key marginals against the Conservatives. And the condition of stepping down and not splitting the vote was that they would get a referendum on Brexit, get the referendum result implemented. They would get Brexit done. So I think, you know, I don't think we're really dealing with an organisation. You know, I don't think the average person who has conservative politics is going to be convinced by PR, really, because they're going to see that although it might give them an opportunity to have the representation of another small, more conservative party, it would ultimately mean more governments that were not to their liking.
Okay, we need to move on a little bit. I'd like to welcome I can't read your name. My eyesight's a bit bad. Is it Magdalene Williams? If you want to say where you're from, whatever, that's perfectly okay. But I'm going to go now to David Newman.
Right. The question is about what sort of campaign would get voters asking their candidates to support PR. And that means reaching ordinary voters, not just the people on Twitter and Facebook. Now, from my point of view, voting in a PR election is wonderful fun. The first time I had a vote in Belfast City Council, I had 25 candidates to rank from best to worst. And it was actually more fun working which ones I hated more, putting that at the bottom. In the middle, I had to decide whether to vote hire someone who killed quite a few people but stopped 10 years ago, or someone who'd cleaned up the evidence from forensic evidence from a murder 2 weeks ago. But I put them both ahead of the DUP. And it isn't actually difficult in mathematics. It might even work in England, which we know has poorer mathematics education than Scotland, Wales, or Ireland. And getting over the idea of what it's like to be in a PR system, learning from all the places which have successful coalition governments. There are Greens in power in lots of countries. Ireland might be the nearest example to show us, where they needed the numbers, and actually neither Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael had anyone writing on policy, so the policy was written by the Green Party. And so learning from that, people coming over on that, and learning from ordinary people in the Scottish Parliament elections, Welsh Assembly elections, Northern Ireland elections, council elections. And of course, that's the related thing is, should we be concentrating all the effort on changing the voter thing at Parliament rather than other assemblies and councils and so on? So what of those campaigning would you do to make it sufficiently fun and interesting that you get a mass following?
Okay, of course, in Scotland, the Green Party are kind of in coalition with the SNP, so that does show what PR can do. And I'll bring in James and William, or anyone else wants to speak in response, that would be okay as well.
Well, I think it's a good point there about where we already have better forms of voting within the British state. So you've got in the Northern Ireland Assembly PR, and you've got in Scotland an additional member system, which has led in the past to Labour cooperating with the Liberals to govern. Currently means the SNP are cooperating with the Greens to govern. And in Wales, where Labour is in government, it's in government as part of an alliance with Plaid Cymru. And they're actually going to change the voting system for the Senedd so that it is a properly proportional voting system in the mathematical sense, although people can always quibble with which particular system they prefer. One of the things that GetPR has been doing, and William's been heavily involved in, is the Councils for PR campaign, which has been focused on getting local councillors to express their support for changing the voting system at Westminster. Perhaps you could talk about that, William.
Yes. To go back to the question, I wish I knew the answer. We at getprdone, as I said earlier, we're not a big organisation, and we don't have the funds that some of the bigger organisations do. I mean, perhaps Alan would like to say something about this. We go out and we campaign as much as we can. You know, I mean, in the last 6 months, we must have given out 40,000 leaflets. We've got stickers and all that kind of stuff. Of course, it's not just on social media where you can do this. Alan is a huge supporter of face-to-face campaigning, and we do what we can. I think once this meeting is over, we'll probably have yet more conversations about what to do, because it's actually very interesting to hear people's opinions about what they want to see in campaigns, and interesting to hear, because we're quite a tight group, and this is a much broader group, and it would be very interesting to hear from you what you would like to see, what ideas you'd like to see in our campaigning, because that could influence us. As far as the work of getprdone is Councils for PR is concerned, we've been working at it now hard for just over a year. We are getting results. We will be getting more results. Inevitably, this is so annoying. We've had quite a few instances recently of Labour councillors who've wanted to support the motion. They've forwarded and seconded it and have brought it to council meetings, and it's been debated, and at the last minute the Labour councillors has been whipped to vote against, which I think is an appalling state of affairs. Fortunately, as you know, the Conservatives lost over 40 councils in the last election, one of which was now entirely controlled by the Green Party, which is mid Suffolk. So we'll be writing them very soon saying, because that should be a shoe-in, as indeed should all the new Lib Dem councils. They should just be automatic rubber stamp jobs. There are lots more councils now that are in no overall control, and we will be working quite hard with them. But there's this strong idea from the Labour leadership, not the membership, but the leadership, that PR is not something for them at the moment. Quite what will happen after the next election remains to be seen. But we do have a lot of opposition, sadly, from Labour councillors. We have strong support from some of them, but when push comes to shove, they get whipped. I think Liverpool looked very much like it was going to support it, and at the last minute they were whipped, and that was lost about 6 months ago, and so on. And so I'd like to ask people, if Alan has nothing to add to that, I would like to ask people what they would like to see in our campaigns. What would you like to see us talking about?
Right. There's a question there. Does anyone want to speak? I'll bring in. I'm going to bring in. Sorry. I'll bring in Magdalena. Is that your name?
Yes, I
apologise. My eyesight's a bit poor.
Hi, I'm in Orpington, a member of the Bromley Green Party, but I am a lot more active, as you can see from my picture, in pro-EU groups. I am on the European Movement National Council, and having lived in continental Europe a long time and had my education there and so forth, I find the political education in the UK is what we need to work on. people really need to learn, first of all, that what the different systems mean, and then also to learn what actually citizenship means, so that they start voting when it matters, because we have very low voting percentages often. And of course, my big question is here as well, how do we get young people more involved? I find that in most of the groups where I am, that it's very difficult. That's why I talk about education, because people have a certain idea about what politics is about. And very often I am a street campaigner, and I am part of lots of different protests. I go to Extinction Rebellion, used to go when they were Extinction Rebellion and so forth. But young people just simply say, you know, I'm not interested in politics, or I don't do politics, or they have no idea what actually politics is about.
Thank you for that. It was an excellent contribution. I'll bring in Alan Todd.
Yeah, just to basically repeat what I mentioned a bit earlier, and after I'd spoken and people were talking in response to that and other issues and so on, the number of times democracy, democracy, democracy was mentioned. Will you please drop this idea of a progressive alliance? Call it a democratic alliance. You'll pull in a lot more people with that, because there are certain individuals, certain political groups and so on that like to define themselves as progressive, and what they have done under that label has been very unpopular with a lot of people. PR is all about democracy. It should be, you should call it a democratic alliance. And I say this as somebody who's been a supporter of PR longer than I've been an eco-socialist, for about 10 years longer. And I think the whole movement for PR is shooting itself in the foot if it's going to get hung up on this progressive word. Drop it. Focus on what it is all about, which is democracy. That's me done.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Very valid.
Can I just bring in Alan's story, because I know you indicated. Go on mute, Alan.
Mute myself here. I'll just speak for a minute. I think James and William are doing a good job. We're a group we're the bad boys of the PR movement. We go out there and do things like send out leaflets like this, which you can see, which says, "Hey Keir, what do you think of electoral reform?" And it's a picture of Keir Hardie, "It's essential," and a picture of Keir Starmer, "Not a priority." We go out there and really sort of raise hell all the time. We're the only group that has, this is our publication here of our 8-page tabloid. You can just see that. It's a meme with a picture of Starmer and Sunak. And there are differences between the Conservative Party and Labour, no question. But on the question of electoral reform, both Sunak and Starmer have the same viewpoint. They say they want elections for only one reason, so their party can win. We as voters want the election results that reflect our wishes. That's the last thing they want. We're out to try and smash the two-party dictatorship which we have in this country. And we got to do that with memes, with jokes, with, William's done some videos. We have all this kind of stuff all the time, trying to fire people up, because the fact is that we want to have a sense there's a campaign going on. It's not just sort of a little table on the high street, a staller. We want to go out there with banners. William, gets out there, shouts. We're out there saying we want something to happen. And we were at Durham. It was 100,000 people there. We did our best. We're going to Manchester. We're going to Liverpool. We're going to the Labour Party conference. We've got some ideas there. The fact is, you see, one of the reasons I'm quite critical of the Green Party, because it's not a campaigning party. There's no party that could win more from PR than the Green Party. But they just say, well, it's our policy. Yeah, well, so what? But how did the suffragettes get the vote? They went out there and campaigned for it. And how did the poll tax get knocked down? All this kind of stuff. People sort of think that Keir Starmer is going to sort of wake up one day and say, oh, well, yeah, let's have PR. It's not going to happen unless we go out there and raise hell. And that's what we're trying to do all the time in our Facebook group. And I just really would encourage people, like William and several people go down to Parliament once a month. I put in the chat line here, getprdone@gmail.com. We're just about to start a program where we're going to mail out, we got 10,000 copies of this flyer. We're going to mail that out. We've got our tabloid here, why we need PR. It's 8 pages. On the back here is, just a second, is James's lovely article, Why Socialists in the Labour Party should support PR. We're out there on the referendum question, on people's assemblies, citizens' assemblies, why, quoting, you see, this is the kind of thing, people know who those people are, right? Robin Cook and Mo Molan. There are heroes in the Labour Party. We didn't know, perhaps, that they are, in fact, are big supporters of PR. Let's go out there and say, hey, what does Robin Cook say? What does Mo Molan say? And those are the kind of people who can win over Labour Party voters. So we just go out there all the time, have quite a lively Facebook group. And I encourage you, send an email to getprdone@gmail.com. We'll start very shortly to be mailing out to you. We would like a little donation because we have almost no money. Some of these groups have hundreds of thousands of pounds and have like 10 full-time employees. We are completely a passion project. People like James, like William, the people on our social media team, we go out there, but we need more people. And the Green Party does not believe in campaigning for PR. They think, oh, once in a while, we'll try to have a little Zoom call, and Natalie Bennett. It's not going to make it, folks, unless we get really out there, have, hundreds of people. PR is not a sexy issue, support a better voting system. Sadly, most people don't even know what kind of a voting system we have now. And you can't promise that, we're going to fight climate change if you have PR. It's not, the people of Britain might say, we don't want action on climate change. Well, we're just promising the possibility that we'll have more control, that elections will be run in the public interest and not in the partisan interests of particular parties. And that's the way, in Canada, where I'm from, in the United States, and Victor will know very well, and in this country, we have two-party dictatorships. And it's been that way in the United States since the 1860s, in Canada since 1867, in this country since 1920. It just goes back and forth, blah, 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 blah. And we've got to break that system. So we got to go out there and rock and roll. That's how things are going to change. It's not going to change by just sort of passing motions. Yeah, that's good. But we got to go out there. Someone's working up a song to the tune of YMCA about get PR done, all kinds of have fun, because I just end on this. A fellow, about a 70-year-old guy in Wales, he just started joining our group and says, I really like working with Get PR Done because you guys have fun. And that's what we try and do, is have fun. William and I argue like hell all the time, James and I, but we're out there doing our very best and with enthusiasm. I don't always feel that enthusiastic, but we try to really push that message.
So I need to bring in Lucy, please.
Hello. Yes, I love what Alan Storey is saying, but I think the people on here are perhaps missing something that you may not realise. That I'm an enthusiast for proportional representation, but the first thing you discover when you start getting enthusiastic about PR, is that there are lots of different systems and that you just don't know your way around them. And you don't know, and I don't know when you say that we must support PR, I don't know what's the system you're going for. And I think there needs to be, as Magdalena said, political education, and particularly political education about systems of PR. And I think that this group needs to agree on what system we're trying to promote, and equip people like me to argue for it. That's my...
I'll try and answer some of that. I'd love to talk about education, and Europe, but I'll do that later. Again, this is something that we've discussed a lot. If an organization like Get PR Done plumps for one form of PR, which we have not done, if we were to do that, the risk is that we would then just be inundated with why that system is wrong. And we would lose the bigger picture of what we're trying to fight for. The decision about which system will be used will not ultimately be taken by an organisation like Get PR Done. It'll be taken by the political scientists in Westminster, or better still, by a People's Parliament. It is difficult because people do frequently ask us, well, which system, because there are probably 20 different systems out there. We've already used the D'Hondt system in the elections for the European Parliament, when, interestingly, of course, there were a lot of Green MPs. Most people seem to be supporting the idea of the STV, the single transferable vote system. When I'm asked, I just say I'm not prepared to have that conversation because it won't be up to me. I've done some research on it, and to be absolutely honest, whatever form of PR we end up hopefully getting, I will not be one of the cogs that makes that decision. So when I'm asked that, I choose not to give an answer and say, let's get to a situation where that's the important conversation.
Let's go back, Lucy.
Yeah, I don't think, I understand the hesitation about plumping for a particular system, but I don't think that allows you to not educate people about what the different systems are, and then to say, as you just did, that it needs to be a democratic decision which system is adopted. But people, I feel I can't be that strange that I'm worried about PR because I feel ignorant and that I don't feel safe to argue for it because I don't know which system I'm talking about. So if you could educate people about more about what the choices would be between what, and then reassure them that this should be done. The decision should be taken absolutely through a People's Assembly or whatever, a democratic decision. That would keep me happy.
I mean, I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and I'd like to answer Magdalena's point from earlier, is that the amount of political education in this country compared to mainland Europe is zero. We have no sense of education of political systems, what citizenship actually means, why we should vote, what the responsibility of that, what part people can take place in what is one's responsibility as a citizen within a democracy. There's no education about that at school level, and so because it's not happening at school, it then just becomes this endlessly long tracts that people have to absorb. There's no sort of quick fix to it. It would need, and I'm sure Martin would back me up on this, it would need a radical overhaul of the educational system, which is long overdue anyway. The information is out there. I see somebody very briefly posted a link to a book, or I think it was a book. The information is out there. The article on Wikipedia about the various PR systems is very interesting and can lead you to all sorts of other things. It's impossible, it's absolutely impossible to condense all that information into a 200-word bite-sized tweet. It's just not possible. There are so many systems. I wish it was easier, but I'm afraid it isn't. And I don't know how to get an easy answer to the question. James, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I feel the same as Lucy in terms of people who start asking me questions about different voting systems. I mean, I'm quite clueless mathematically. So I mean, the different ways of counting votes and things, it's very confusing to me. But I think we've taken a good approach to get PR done, in that we've signed up to the Good Systems Agreement that was proposed by Make Votes Matter, and which a lot of organisations have signed up to, and that has a list of principles that we would like to see in the voting system, and the call for a citizens' assembly to make the decision. As William said, you know, that might be a way of you know, giving a resolution to those people who are a bit uncertain. I mean, yeah, we do need to talk about what exists in different countries, which proportional systems are not particularly good. I mean, you know, there are some countries where there's just one constituency, and there is concern people have about, will I still have a local representative, and will things be centralised just into the capital, and power will not be dispersed across the country. So I mean, the Good Systems Agreement does answer that, about some of those concerns, and I think it's a good answer that we would say a citizens' assembly should make the decision.
Before going forward, I want to know if Jay, Jenny or Sue wants to say anything. I'll give you a second or two. Yes, Jay, go on.
I share the feeling that I'd like to know the kind of alternatives. I accept that there's poor political education, but I don't think that's a reason for not outlining what the choices would be without making a choice, but just outlining what the major forms of PR would be that we'd have to choose from, or the government would choose, or a citizens' assembly would choose, or whatever.
Thank you, Jay. Jenny, Sue, do you want to say anything? Okay, no, hang on a second. I mean, we have a system. Just from excuse my position. Obviously, Scotland's got PR. Why don't we just copy Scotland? It was, you know. Anyway, I'll bring in David. David, please.
Yeah, I can. If you're wanting education, I can tell you where to get it. Although, because Peter Emerson in Northern Ireland has been working on this for years, he writes very, very simple and clear books with lots of examples that you don't need to be very good at mathematics. He even's come up with a meeting and voting system to find consensus between people who hate each other. It's not voting on candidates, it's voting on answers to a problem, on different options. In fact, instead of having a referendum, you have a preferendum where people rank the options 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And he's found consensus, use this in Northern Ireland and in Kosovo. And of course, the main point isn't, he even has a computer program that, say you're in a club or something and you want to do a vote, you can time the results of 20 different voting systems on your votes. So that's really good for education, but the bit of education that's more important is showing how unfair the current systems are, rather than worrying too much about what the ideal fair system would be.
Okay, if I could just say something a second. We were going to have a speaker from UK, was it Democracy Unlocked? And what I think was interesting, that last year there was a massive campaign to get trade unions to support PR, and my union, Unite, supported PR, and we have to applaud the work that Howard Beckett did, who's the Assistant General Secretary, in terms of promoting it. Because obviously that's one way into the Labour Party, in terms of the position. The other problem, of course, is now I read today that the mayoral elections in London will be first past the post, and isn't that awful? really awful. But anyway, I'm going to call it, see if anyone else wants to speak, and then I'm going to ask the speakers to close it down for us, to say they closing remarks, basically. So does anyone else want to speak? Could you do that at the end? But oh no, Alan, go on, no problem.
I just put in the Google the ACE project. That is an online system which in fact has all kinds of information about all the different voting systems. You know, and the problem is, you see, there's closed lists and open lists. There is single transferable vote. There's additional member system. The fact is that there are so many questions to look at. I have a great fear that what would happen if we say, okay, we've decided you get PR done or whatever, who the hell we are. I mean, what does that matter? But we've got no legitimacy for a little group like us to say we're in favor of STV or whatever. There is some very strong positions that there's only one form of PR that's worth fighting for. The Lib Dems, for example, are very big on single transferable vote. Some other of us, I actually like the system in Finland, where you only have 11 constituencies in the whole country, and you have, like Helsinki has like 20 MPs. There's all these kinds of debates, but my great fear is the following, that what happens is we're going to have the STV pro-PR movement, the additional member system pro-PR movement. We're going to have all these different kinds of movements, and then the male, the son, they can't even agree. You see, this is what happens. Let these, you know, lefties or wonks or whatever get into this. They can't even agree. The whole thing will break down. We've got plenty of material to work for to say this system where we have now is not working. It's not working on climate change. It's not working on families and children in poverty. It's not working for people like me on the left. There is no party. If you don't like you don't like the Tories, let's don't. So is Keir Starmer the only alternative? Well, that's the problem, is that there can be no socialist party, serious party, until you get PR. Because I was at a meeting Tuesday night. Oh, you know, PR is a bad thing because we can't have the one last heave for the Labour Party. I mean, there's so many illusions out there among the Corbynistas about what's sort of going to be happening. Oh, you know, PR, that'll bring in the Lib Dems. There's just a lot of crap out there. I won't sort of go on and on about it. But what we need to do, our main priority is to show why the existing system does not work. And that's not too difficult if you just sort of watch the news, read the newspaper, start to think about it. There's plenty of material out there, and then say at a later stage, once we get rid of this system, then we'll start to rebuild anew. I think you know, we'd be quite willing to have a discussion, you know, on the different forms of open list system. It's not the kind of thing that are going to win people over to PR is these different kinds of systems. That's not the way it happened in New Zealand. They had their first referendum was, do you like the existing voting system or do you want to change? And they had like a 90% vote in favor of changing. Then they had a second referendum when it then became a real question rather than sort of an abstract, what you know, they really were sitting there saying, we've got a chance to change the system. And they then picked their system, which is the New Zealand system. It's sort of like the additional member system. But it wasn't an abstract question. At this time in this country, it is an abstract question as to what kind of PR. We got to get out there and show, in fact, why this system does not work.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak?
Alan, as ever, has summed it up excellently.
Okay, I'm going to let the main speakers finish at the end. Does anyone else want to speak?
Pete, I saw Pete had his hand up earlier.
Did you want to speak, Peter?
Well, the one thing that interests me at the moment is this man, I think his name is Jamie Driscoll in the Northeast, who is being barred from standing, but may stand as an independent, much in the way that Ken Livingstone once did in London. And I think that's the fact that those kind of situations can arise when you've got a two-party duopoly is, you know, I'm using slightly academic language here. We're talking about duopoly and things, but I think Alan is right. You need to push it. You need to push it in a populist way, and I think also you should remember that ordinary people do use Twitter and Facebook nowadays quite a lot. So social media is a useful tool for doing so. I think that's enough from me.
And apparently TikTok for younger people. Very quickly, Alan.
Quickly, we're right now approaching Jamie Driscoll, one of our colleagues in Durham, which is right near Newcastle. Hey, Jamie, you're in favor of PR, right? We're going to do a meme of Jamie Driscoll coming out for PR. We're working on it right as I speak. And this is what we try and do. You know, Bob Crow, he was a big supporter of PR, you know, promoting all these kinds of people who are out for PR. But I agree, it's a real system breakdown that the Labour Party is a bloody dictatorship. And you know, they can't have someone slightly on the left, like Jamie Driscoll is not a communist or something. He's a pretty kind of mainstream kind of guy, but he's just not in it with Keir Starmer. So you're out the door. I mean, people are seeing what's going on in the Labour Party. I'm not at all looking forward to a Labour government. It's a frightening proposition, actually, to me. It's their prosecutor in chief will be the prime minister.
Thank you, Alan. Victor, did you want to say anything? You're from America, so.
Well, I've just been listening with great interest and learning a lot. I don't really have anything to report, but I want to thank everybody for your participation, the speakers, and also some of the other participants. It was very informative for me, and I hope to keep track of what you all are doing.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to closing remarks from James and William, please.
Well, I'd just like to echo what Victor has said. Thanks to everyone for their comments and questions on what I've said. I'm not the greatest public speaker in the world. I hope that's been okay. Thanks to the organisers, and I would urge people to get involved in Get PR Done. I mean, we're a group of people who are very cooperative, and we'd like to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you, James. I thought you spoke really well, actually. But and William.
Yes, I'd just like to add to James, and Alan's already given it to you, but I'm going to give it to you again. getprdone@gmail.com. Come and join us. Come and talk to us. This has been a very useful meeting for me. One of the things I do is I haven't done it for a couple of months now, but I've made quite a few films which get tweeted. I'm going to do a film on why the current system is wrong and what PR would bring as a benefit. I think that should be my next film project, because you're right. I think it was Lucy who brought it up. People don't know enough about it. In all political groups, there's always a fair amount of speaking to the converted, and we have a lot of people that we need to convert. And that's the big thing. And we are a good bunch of people, and we're fun, and we meet. The steering group meets once a month. We have other committees that meet, and we need new energy. We need new blood. We need people to join. So get in touch with Alan through getprdone@gmail.com. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you,
Thank you, Roy, for chairing.
Can I say one last thing? I thank the moderators of Green Left Facebook. I don't think we've ever had a post turned down, and thank you. It's one of our main outlets all the time, just punching them out there in Green Left. And thanks, Martin and Peter. I don't know who else is a moderator. Are you, Roy, also a moderator? Thanks a lot, guys. It's one of our main places.
Yeah.
Thank you for that compliment, Alan. We tried to do our best to engage the rest of the left as well as inside the Green Party. I think the point that this is my closing remarks, basically. I think the point was raised about the Green Party not really campaigning on PR and basically letting it stick in the policy in the book, and then we don't really campaign on it, despite obviously the beneficials. We could have a really difficult situation, for example, in Brighton, with Caroline Lucas resigning, not standing next election, where we could suffer because of first past the post election. It raises too many difficult problems for us. If anyone wants to get involved with Green Left, we have a Facebook site, a blog, Twitter, etc. And I'm pleased and thank you for everybody coming today. It was a really good meeting, lots of interesting points, and if everybody's still okay, Pete will make a social media post on what has been said. Right, so great, thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.